Hi everyone. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about the biblical calendar, how to determine it. We're going to talk about all kinds of topics. It's going to take more than 2 or 3 videos to cover the topic. We're going to cover the controversies. We're going to cover how it relates to the biblical chronology and how it also relates to Yeshua's death and resurrection, his birth, and the Exodus year. I will show that the same calendar solution can be used from the beginning of Scripture to the end of Scripture for all biblical dates. For those of you who want to jump to the conclusion really quick, I can state how the biblical calendar is determined in a few sentences. The biblical calendar has to answer 2 questions. When does the first month begin, and when does the month begin? When does the month begin? The answer to that question is when the first crescent or the first light is seen from the new moon, preferably observed from some location in Israel. To the second question, which month is the first month? The first month is determined by the spring equinox. If the spring equinox falls after the 15th day of the month, then that month will be declared a 13th month, or a 13th month will be added to the year. If the spring equinox falls before the 15th day of the month, or on the 15th day of the month, and the year already has 12 months in it, then that month will be the first month of the year. So it's pretty simple. It's based on observing the sun and observing the moon. It's a purely observationally based calendar. It requires no calculations whatsoever, although we can use calculations to figure out more easily these days when these times will be. The only thing that's required is counting from 1 to 29 or 1 to 30, and counting from 1 to 365 or 1 to 366, and applying these rules. So that's the answer for those of you who want to jump to the conclusion right away. There are several controversies about how the calendar relates to the spring equinox. Some take the new moon nearest to the spring equinox, which is approximately the rule I stated for you, and some always take the new moon on or after the spring equinox. I will be showing definitively what the answer to this question is. Some think that the spring equinox should be thrown out the door and disregarded altogether, and that sun's cycle of days or the circuit of days has nothing to do with the year, and that the year begins on the first month, before which they must find Barley to determine which the first of the month is. The Barley teachers believe that the year isn't determined by the spring equinox. In fact, they don't believe the sun determines the year at all. They believe that Nisan 1 is the first day of the year, and that Nisan 1, or the first day of the month of Aviv, which is its alternative name, is determined by making a barley observation before the first of the month, and that's how they determine when the year is. I will be addressing this controversy also and showing that the Aviv argument does not hold up. Okay, what I want to address first now is the Barley argument for determining the first month of the year. The Barley teachers, as I will call them, determine the first month of the year based on the observation of barley. And their principal proof text is Deuteronomy 16:1, which goes, "Observe the month of Aviv." Well, that's how the verse starts, "Observe the month of Aviv," in most translations. Their argument is principally based on the meaning of the month name, Ha'aviv. Aviv is a Hebrew word which means ears, or barley ears, or ears of grain, in some early or fresh stage, so it could be roughly equivalent to fresh grain ears or fresh grain ear. Aviv is in the singular, but it's a collective noun, and it also has the definite article in front of it, ha'aviv, which is probably generic. For instance, if we say the cow eats grass, really what I mean is cows eat grass. So if I say ha'aviv, the fresh grain ear, what I really mean is fresh grain ears without the definite article on the word. What the Barley teachers do is they extract an instruction or a commandment from the month name to go out and observe barley in order to determine when the month is. The month name also appears in the book of Exodus in several places in the phrase Hodesh HaAviv, or the month of Aviv. But Deuteronomy 16:1 is the strongest text for their argument. The question is, does a month name give us the right to extract a commandment from it? There is another month in the Hebrew Scriptures that's used with a definite article and has a descriptive meaning, and this is in 1 Kings 8:2, where it says the moon of Ha'etanim. Ha'etanim means the constantly flowing streams, as a description of the 7th month, because most of the other streams dried up during the month. So, for the sake of an exercise, if we were to substitute the 7th month in place of the Deuteronomy 16:1 passage so that it read, "Observe the new moon of the ever-flowing streams," then the question would be, if that were the case, should we determine when the 7th month is by mounting up an expedition to see when certain streams dry up and only the streams that are left that constantly flow throughout the year can survive the month of Etanim, or the month of constantly flowing streams? And the answer is, of course not. We're not going to mount up an expedition based on a month name. Another example I might give you is that the Chinese have a year name called the Year of the Monkey. And let's say, for example, the Chinese wanted to observe the Year of the Monkey with some special ceremonies, say fireworks or some kind of celebration. And they put out a governmental edict saying, "Observe the Year of the Monkey." Then the question is, are the Chinese going to extract from the phrase, "Observe the Year of the Monkey," instructions on how to determine when the Year of the Monkey occurs? No, of course not. They already know how the Year of the Monkey occurs, and an instruction to observe the Year of the Monkey has nothing to do with going out and finding monkeys or to see if there's monkeys. In the ancient Near East, month names were often named for some phenomenon that took place in the month. For example, at Ebla, they had a month called the month of plowing. So if somebody were to observe the month of plowing, for some reason they wanted to do a special observance in it, then would they think that the month of plowing is determined by going out before the new moon of the month of plowing to see if they can find men plowing? And based on whether they find men plowing, then the month is either declared the month of plowing or not the month of plowing. And then further, barley teachers also believe that if barley is not found before the new moon, but that it is found after the new moon, then they get to disregard the barley found after the new moon as characterizing the month. So in the parallel example, if no men plowing were found before the month of plowing, but only after the new moon of the month of plowing, then the people who use plowing as a criteria for determining the plowing month will say, following the Karaite example or the barley teacher example, that it's not the month of plowing because the men plowing were not found plowing before the new moon, but they were only found plowing after the new moon. You begin to see the ridiculousness of this argument. Obviously, a month name is not a prescription in the ancient Near East for determining when the month occurs. When I draw conclusions from my research, I like to go by the norm for something. Normally, month names were numbered, or they weren't named, they were numbered at first. And then after they were numbered, they were given names, often according to some phenomenon within the month. For instance, at Ebla, they named a month the month of whirling wind. That was about the month of September at Ebla. No one would think that the month of whirling wind meant that the month was determined by whirling wind because of its name. The position of the month of the whirling wind within the year was determined as usual by the position of the sun and the moon in their cycles. And then it got the name of whirling wind because that was a phenomenon that typically occurred in or around that month. At Ebla, they also have a month called the month of rain. The month got its name because it tends to rain in that month. The month's position in the year wasn't determined by the rain. The month's position was determined by the sun and the moon. and then the month was named after the phenomenon that occurred in or around that month. It doesn't always rain. Sometimes the rain is off a little bit. At no time in the ancient Near East, as far as we know, did anyone believe that a month name controlled the timing of the month, or that the timing of the month was figured out by the month name. The month was figured out by the movement of the moon and the position of the moon within the year. Normally, the phrase, keep watch for the new moon of the XXX, where XXX stands for the month name after some phenomenon, means keep watch for the new moon with that name. It doesn't mean keep watch for XXX, whatever the phenomenon is to determine the month. This is unscientific reasoning. It's backwards, and it's not the norm. The Barley teachers like to make you think that they're going by language norms when they say that the definite article is used, ha'aviv, the month of green ears, as if this makes a difference. But the fact is it does not. As we have seen, many month names are named with a the in front of them in the ancient Near East. Position of a month within a year is not determined by its month name. It's determined by the astronomical signs. The title of a month is a consequence of its position within the year. It's the effect. It's the consequence. It's not the cause of locating where the month goes within the year. The astronomical signs in the heavens are the cause of where it goes within the year. Barley teachers inform us that we must go against the astronomical norms in order to fix the first month within the year. Barley teachers also inform us that we need to disregard the language norms of the time in order to interpret the verse so that they can fix the month by the timing of barley. But this is not according to the norm for the language. It is also unscientific. Barley teachers don't have a claim to superior spiritual authority either. In actual fact, they get their doctrine from a 9th century AD sect called Karaites, and not even all the Karaite sects could agree. In fact, some Karaite sects didn't even go by barley to determine the first month. They used the spring equinox. The Karaites don't have anything like papal succession, or a doctrine of papal succession to say that they've inherited the spiritual mantle and therefore are right. As far as we know, the only spiritual mantle that we have is the Scripture, and they do not agree with the Scripture. Now I want to show you some of the evidence for ancient Near East month names. So we'll go and look at a PDF document from William Shea, a Seventh-day Adventist who does research into calendar matters. Okay, here's the paper that I was talking about. This is a paper by William H. Shea from Andrews University, and you can see up here where he published it and all the reference and info here. And this is on the calendars of Ebla, Part 1, the old calendar. He has a Part 2 describing the new Ebla calendar, which is also very interesting, but I don't have time to go through that now. We see here the month of whirling winds that I was talking about here. Here's a transliteration and a translation. So let's look at a few of these month names. The month of whirling winds. This is the new calendar, which I mentioned. They changed the names of the months. Seems like they were named in a very biblical fashion to begin with, and that they turned more idolatrous in the new calendar here. Month of whirling winds, month of plowing or seeding, month of rain, month of clouds, month of shadows, month of drying, unidentified, month of man, month of cutting 2, intercalary, month of sheep, month of heat. Very interesting. Let's look at some of these. Month of rain, Gashum. Looks like Hebrew Geshem, doesn't it? Because both are Semitic languages. Eblaite, in fact, is an early form of Hebrew. Month of Enun, or month of clouds. Again, this is similar to Hebrew. Anan. Month of man, Isi. What's the Hebrew word for man? Ish. Very, very similar, isn't it? Now, of course, no one would presume to think that the months by which these months' names were named, or the new moons, no one would presume to think that the phenomenon described by the name was used to determine when the month was. That would be ridiculous. Certainly, it would not be the norm. Let's try an experiment here. Let's look up observe the year of the monkey. Here we go. Well, as the Chinese seem to observe the year of the monkey. Observe the year of the monkey. The words, they would actually say observe the year of the monkey in English. So let's say now that observe is shamar or shamor in Hebrew, means to watch or to watch for. So then that means we should use monkeys. We should go out and look for monkeys to observe the year of the monkey. So again, I underline how ridiculous this is. Well, that concludes my analysis of the Barley teacher's doctrine. It's false doctrine, and this is only the beginning. As I begin to discuss the proper elements of the Hebrew calendar and how to determine it, it will become more and more obvious that determining the calendar by Barley is a sidetrack from the truth. Just a little postscript here. I noticed something in Shia's paper I hadn't seen before because I was looking mostly at the old calendar. But in the two identified months, we have actually some descriptive names for these months here. And one of them corresponds to March, April. And we see that in the new calendar, it's called the month of coming forth. And I jumped at this right away because the month of coming forth is hauntingly similar to Ha'aviv, which is the fresh grain ear, which is describing an agricultural phenomenon of fresh growth. So it's very similar here. Now, what is interesting is that Shia points out that, like the Greeks, the Ebleites numbered their months from the fall. So the first month of the year would be the month of whirling winds in September and October. And we come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The seventh month would be March, April, or the month of coming forth. And then the intercalary months, like the Babylonians, are put into the late summer, like a second Ululu. So what this is showing is that even though this March-April month was named the month of the coming forth, the determination of the year was made in the fall. It was not made in the spring. So obviously they were not using coming forth to determine the timing of the month because it's number 7 in the order of Eblaite months. Thank you for listening.